Welcome to the Unstuck and Happy podcast. We all get stuck, but how long you stay there is up to you. I'm your host, John Polish, founder of the Unstuck Happiness Conference. And this is the show where we interview people who've overcome tremendous adversity and have emerged as leaders. So if you need a little inspiration and hope in your day, get ready, because here comes another great Unstuck story. Welcome back. I think today is going to be a great episode. It's going to help a lot of people because I have with me today a guest who has not only had to overcome a great deal of adversity in her life, but she's also had to kind of navigate and live through her son facing a tremendous deal of adversity as well. And so welcome to the show, Sylvia Farbstein.
Hi, John. So happy to be here with you today.
Awesome to have you. I met Sylvia a few years ago. She's got just a wonderful energy to her. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Sure. I manage my 20-year-old son, Brandon Farbstein's professional speaking career. Up until a few months ago, we would travel the country and he would speak in front of audiences of all ages, schools and professionals, basically elevating empathy and teaching people how to innovate their own solutions. Brandon has a very unique life journey that he has been on, and it has not only taught him an incredible amount of life lessons, but taught me as well, because in raising a child, what we realize is the more we teach them, the more they teach us. So I'm so thrilled today to be able to share our story with you.
Absolutely. So 20 years ago, you probably had no clue your life would head down this path, did you?
I really didn't. And I was one who, at that point, I feel like I was basically addicted to certainty because everything in my life sort of had gone according to plan. I was a hard worker. I knew what it took to move up the corporate ladder, and I sort of had my life planned out. And then at the age of 2, when I took Brandon on his checkup, that all sort of changed.
Okay. And before we get to that, so Brandon also has an older sister, right?
Yes. Brooke is 2.5 years older than Brandon. So she is now 23. And so when I gave birth to Brandon, I certainly was not a first-time mom. I thought, oh, this is going to be pretty easy because I've done it before. And back then I thought, you raise one child, you know how to raise them all.
So tell us about that. You have 4.5 or 5-year-old at the same time that you discover that Brandon's condition. Tell us how that all came about.
Yeah, it was a random 2-year checkup at the pediatrician. I took Brandon on, and the doctor gave him a glowing review, said, oh, he looks great, he's happy, get him dressed and take him home. And I looked at the doctor and I said, something in my gut tells me otherwise. It seems when I look at him that his torso is growing in length, but his limbs are not. And at this age, his older sister Brooke was outgrowing her clothing every few months, and Brandon has been in this size for quite a while. And it was at that point that the doctor took a closer look at him and realized that I was right, that something was just not normal, and sent us to a geneticist who then sent us to the hospital for a full skeletal x-ray. So it was, at that point, a 6-month journey to get him diagnosed. Every doctor that took a look at those x-rays knew they were looking at something, but they had no idea what. And they ended up sending the x-rays to the UCLA Skeletal Dysplasia Registry, where it took them months to finally come back to us with a diagnosis of metatropic dysplasia, which happens to be a very rare form of dwarfism, less than 100 medically documented cases in the world.
Wow. And just for clarity, UCLA is on the other side of the country from where you're at. right?
That's right. That's right. We were living on the East Coast in Virginia. And so they knew that they needed to get the big guns involved in this case.
So tell us a little bit about your emotional state during that time.
Well, it was interesting because, like I said, I thought I had everything planned out and thought I knew what it took to get to the next step. And what I quickly realized is that I absolutely had no control over what was to come. The nice thing is that my husband and I knew that our job as Brandon's parents were to just help him live the best life that he could live, and that he would still be the same person with or without a diagnosis. So we sort of kept an eye on that. But at the same time, I will admit that it was a scary time because when we finally did get the diagnosis, there was no online support group. There was no tribe that I could turn to and ask questions of. And we sort of felt alone and isolated at the time. We were living in a state um, far away from our relatives. And all of that made us realize that we needed to create our own chosen family and surround ourselves with people that would give us unconditional love and support to help us walk through this journey that we were about to undertake.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the things that I wanted to discuss today. So you and your husband have been together for how long?
We've now been married for almost 26 years.
Right. And, and that's incredible for so many reasons. But one being that I know that when you're faced with this kind of adversity, there is a huge divorce rate.
Absolutely. And I heard those statistics as well. And it's really interesting because my husband and I had sort of a whirlwind romance. We met on a blind date in New York City. We were engaged within 4.5 months, and 11 months after meeting, we were married. So although we were open to a new path in life, I moved from New York to Virginia. We truly had no idea what lay ahead of us. And it was difficult, but we both made the commitment very early on to put Brandon's needs at the forefront of every decision that we made. But it was also really important for us not to lose sight of each other and realize that we were one unit, we were a team together.
And I think that's critically important. What happens so often is that, at this time, you both need some sort of emotional support, and the needs are often very different. And so what we see is that people will be upset that they're not getting their needs met from their partner. And it turns out that, it's very difficult to kind of navigate that and keep that going. So I see a lot of parents who struggle with any kind of family issues to really stay together and stay focused on having a goal, having a future like you guys have done. Right.
Absolutely. And also you have to sort of come to the realization that communication styles are very different for men and women. And while we as women love to talk about our feelings, men don't necessarily love to do that. And that's okay. We need to respect each other's space and allow that to, sort of happen organically. And I found a support within friends and family and other people that sort of, supplemented the relationship that I had with my husband. So you can't be in your own little cocoon as two people trying to do this in isolation. It's really important to expand your circle.
Yeah. And I was one of those men that didn't talk about feelings. I wasn't even sure I had any for a long time. And now I make a living talking about emotional intelligence and talking about feelings all day. But it's amazing how we can change when we have to.
Absolutely. And when we're forced to,
Right.
growth doesn't come from being comfortable.
So along the way, a lot has happened. Tell us a little bit about that journey, just with Brandon growing up and some of the issues that he faced and how it affected you guys.
Absolutely. So his formative years, preschool, elementary school, they were pretty cool. He had a bubbly personality, loved to perform in the talent shows, um, had a really happy childhood during those early years. And it wasn't until middle school that we saw things changing. Now, middle school is not an easy time for any child. And even us adults, I don't think most of us would ever choose to go back to those years. Those are really challenging times. And with Brandon, it's, really in middle school when there were just pronounced differences in his stature to the stature of his peers and his athletic acumen, which wasn't there compared to the boys in his grade. So he had to find his own identity. And what Steve and I did was we encouraged him to try all kinds of activities, but the one that really stuck with him was drama. He absolutely loved to be on stage, to act and sing, and he would constantly get accolades from the audience telling him that within minutes they forgot about his short stature and thought that he, just took over the performances. So it was really neat to see that he was able to find an activity that truly resonated with him. But socially, those middle school years were definitely challenging. And then when Brandon was 15, he had the opportunity to give a TEDx talk here in Richmond, Virginia. And that day literally changed his entire life because that was the first time that he was on stage as himself. All those other times, he got accolades for portraying a character. And when he noticed how the audience absolutely connected with him as he shared his story, he realized his life's purpose. And that is to continue to share his life experiences and to give audiences the ability to see themselves in his story and in his life lessons. But at that time as well, he ended up being severely cyberbullied. Freshman year of high school, during the first week, his, sorry, gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Brandon.
Lost you there for a second. So
Ooh.
I will just add while we're getting fixed.
Brandon, I need you for a second. I don't know what I just did. I just moved my hand. Oh.
We'll just pause it for a minute.
Are you there? No.
Yep.
Something, Brandon, can you help me for a second? I don't know what, I just moved for a second and.
I'm trying to.
There you are.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
I moved for a second.
Edit that, no problem.
Okay, good. So freshman year of high school, within the first week, he was severely cyberbullied. At that point, Brandon used a mini Segway as his mobility device, and his peers put out a challenge on Facebook to videotape him, used some awful derogatory language, and it was really bad. And at that time, Steve, my husband, and I decided that we weren't going to rescue Brandon. We were very honest with him, and we said, we are so devastated that this happened, but this is something that you might have to go through several times in your life. So why don't you help figure out how you're going to deal with this? And he very quickly decided to go to administration and show them the screenshots, and thankfully they were able to find the instigator, and take the right measures.
Mm.
So, that is not the nicest and warmest way to enter your high school years.
Right. And so I've gotten the chance to meet Brandon a few times now, and he is a very impressive young man. And I hope to have him on our podcast sometime as well. But at this point, I really want to focus on you and your family and how, as all of that is happening in his life, how's that affecting you guys?
Sure. So at that point, we were just very pleased with how we saw Brandon using his voice, and we felt like he was navigating his journey without much help from us, and it was fabulous. But as months went by, it became more and more challenging. He ended up having depression and was put on medication. And while I am all for medication for those that need it, our personal experience showed just a negative impact on who he was as a person. And he was really challenging to live with. It was just a battle of anger and pushing us away from him. And at the same time, we could just tell that he was not enjoying his high school experience like we had envisioned it to be for him. So we got him counseling, and it took about a half a dozen different counselors until he found one that he truly resonated with. And it made us realize that not only were we responsible to provide him with appropriate specialists for his skeletal condition, as he had a couple of surgeries at Johns Hopkins and now has a doctor at DuPont Children's Hospital in Delaware. But it was also really important for us to provide him with the opportunity to speak to mental health professionals. And that I learned to be a gift, not only for him, but for all of us, because it started opening up the dialogue. And I feel like when we are raising teenagers that are dealing with this array of feelings that they don't necessarily know how to eloquently communicate to us, they need someone professional, and they need someone not related to them that they could talk to and sort these things out. So that really was a great tool in our toolbox to move things along.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I teach is I talk about finding happiness and overcoming adversity and living unstuck. And one thing that I discovered is that every problem really is the result of an unmet expectation. You want things to be a certain way, and when it's not, it creates this gap, and then we fill that gap with negative emotions. I can completely see how going into middle school would be challenging, because obviously the wanting to be like everyone else and having that, you mentioned athletic issues and things like that. I can see how that can be an extremely challenging time. And I also know how torturous teenagers can be. But what I've told people over and over again is that if you're not getting what you want in a certain area of your life, there's really only two things you can ever do to be happy: is find some way to do something different to get what you want, or change what you want.
I
And
love that. Yes.
right. And I can see in Brandon's case, when I can picture him on stage doing that TED Talk and realizing that instead of wanting to be like everyone else, that he can still have this great life being himself and still be received in a whole different way.
That is so accurate. It really was a life lesson for me, because I don't know about you, but my upbringing was, we as your parents want you to have greater opportunities than we ever had. And we want you to work hard and experience everything that your high school has to offer. And I sort of went into that path with Brandon thinking, well, I went to homecoming and I went to prom and I got to experience, being on student council and doing this and that. And those were the expectations that I had for him. And I think that is a good part of what caused our angst during those early years. And now I've come to the other side of it, realizing that all along, I just needed to look at my son for who he was and not for the vision of who I wanted him to be. Who was I to define the path and the experience that he was going to have in high school? Because he's his own human being. He's not an extension of me and he's not an extension of Steve. He is who he is. And once I sort of let go of the control, it made me realize that his experiences don't even compare to the typical high school experiences. So I think it's an important life lesson that we can all learn as parents to open our hearts and minds to really let our kids steer the way for their path and just be there for guidance and support.
Right. And it looks like he's off to a good start, and there's, the opportunity to have a wonderful life speaking and making a difference, having an impact on other people's lives as well. And you get to be
Absolutely.
along for that ride as his manager, right?
Yes, yes. So when we went to our first NSA conference, the National Speakers Association, we learned so much about the business. And on the second day of the conference, he turned and looked at me and he said, I know this is definitely a career that I want, but I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. So to hire you as my manager. So it's been quite a ride. We literally, travel the country and experience so many wonderful things in connecting with people and truly understanding that we are all more alike than we are different. It's when we start opening up with each other, we realize it's humanity that gives us the common denominator. And it doesn't matter what our age or our background or even our physical ability. It's us wanting to connect with people. And we just all want to feel like we're having an impact. And I think for our youth specifically, they just want to be seen and heard. It's such a simple thing, but I think it sometimes tends to be overlooked.
Well, we're seeing that in our society in general lately. Had a conversation a while back, was leading a discussion group after the riots started, and the race conversation came out. And, my first thought was, the way to overcome racism is not to point a finger in somebody's face and say, don't be a racist. What's worked in my life is when I see somebody that I truly respect for who they are, and they just happen to be different than me. And
Absolutely.
so that's what really is going to engage us and is going to change the world, is not telling people how to feel or what to do, but just being able to experience people who have differences. So what Brandon's doing is awesome because, and especially with like his condition, because we see it almost made fun of a lot on TV and things like that. And he gets to actually stand up there and be just a real man and share his story. And I think that people will resonate a lot with what he has to say.
That is very true. That is absolutely true. We need to widen our lens and stop seeing other people through our own experiences and just start listening more and hearing what they're going through and trying to understand it. And I think if people have the opportunity to truly share what is on their heart, especially with racism, I can't begin to think that I understand everything behind it because I haven't walked in those shoes. But I can certainly sit and listen to talks, and I can read books, and I can really try to understand the background and the why. it really is something that is so critical in order for us to move forward as a society. And I also think that coupled with this feeling of isolation that so many of us felt, during this pandemic, so many people felt so disconnected, but it gave us an opportunity to sort of sit in our own silence and reconnect with ourselves instead of being so distracted by our normally hectic lives. And what I found as a silver lining and a gift in all this was the unexpected time that I now have with Brandon and Brooke. They live in the DC area and they've come back to Richmond, and all four of us have sort of enjoyed each other, during this crazy time as adults. And what a rare gift that is, because ordinarily if things were the way they were, we'd all be busy, running around on our own paths and not really have time to connect and have meaningful conversations.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting time for sure. I've seen every angle of this possible, families that are connecting and reuniting to ones that are breaking up because of it. And I actually, went through some stuff right before this happened. And so found myself living alone, and I went and got a puppy right before it started. So I'll have a whole different look on it. But I find that I'm blessed now to have so many people in my life that have so many differences, whether it's, race or whatever. A lot of diversity in my life, and I've learned so much from it. So what is Brandon's message? What was he passionate enough about to want to share with the world?
His message is to elevate empathy. And he wants everyone to know that it starts with us. So many of us are not taking the time out to do the hard work of excavating all of our pain and suffering and insecurities. But once we do that and discover that we have so many beautiful gifts within each one of us, we realize that we can make a true contribution to the world. And by contributing to humanity, we're all able to see the goodness within each other and not just focus on all of our differences and the divisiveness that seems so pervasive, especially on lots of social media that you might scroll through. So his message is for business professionals and for youth in the school market. It's a universal message of elevate empathy. And now, as schools are starting to think about getting back to session in the fall, businesses are slowly opening up. Empathy is something that we all need to practice, because the lines between our professional and personal world and our school day and our personal day, everything has now been blurred because we're now doing it all from our homes. And we need to better understand what we're going through individually and collectively, so that, like you had said earlier, we align our expectations with reality. And I feel like if we can just take a step back and do that, there will be a lot more harmony in the world. And instead of being scared of a new normal, maybe it could be a better normal.
Right. I was asked to do a presentation recently on empathy, and I struggled with it at first. And I actually had this thought, like, what is the difference between empathy and sympathy? And it occurred to me that sympathy is basically like patting you on the back and saying, boy, I'm sorry you're going through this, almost as I'm pushing you away, going, thank God it's not me.
Yes.
Whereas empathy is more like putting your arm around somebody and saying, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for you.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. No one wants to feel like they're being brushed off. People want to feel like you get me, you see me, you hear me, and you are doing what you can to try to understand me. I mean, that is such a beautiful thing.
And I've seen so many people attempt to be empathetic, and then it comes across. So for me, I got into all of this after I lost my daughter to a genetic disorder. My daughter was born with trisomy 18 and lived for 42 hours. And, what was really challenging afterwards is, you're trying to constantly figure out how to create a new normal and move on with your life. And just when you start to feel good, you run into somebody and then they express, they're trying to be empathetic towards you and they get emotional. And all of a sudden I feel like I have to get emotional too, or else I'm apologizing for their like I have to somehow feel bad for them feeling bad when in the moment I was okay. So it's interesting to watch as people, the best thing you can do for somebody is not tell them, how they feel, but just say, you know what, if you need something, I'm here. But when you
I
try to say, I know
agree.
how you feel, usually we end up kind of messing that up.
Yes, yes. I very distinctively recall when Brandon was in kindergarten, one of the parents looked at me while the kids were, I guess, playing on the playground, and she just said, I feel so sorry for you. And I guess in her mind, she was trying to be sympathetic,
Mhm.
but in my mind, I was just a fury of emotion. I don't want anyone to ever feel sorry for me or my son. I want people to just embrace him for who he is, to not judge, to not compare. And if he's having a hard time, be it, on the playground when he's 5 or 6 years old or in anything else, like you said, just be there.
Yeah. And we feel sympathetic and we feel bad because we're not meeting that certain expectation. So honestly, like in Brandon's life, if he wanted to be if he had the strong desire to be an athlete and he couldn't, he was going to feel bad. But to be able to pivot and do something different, for him to stand on stage and deliver his message, just knowing the number one fear in the world is public speaking. So he can be in front of 1,000 people. He's doing something that 990 of them wouldn't dare do.
That's right. That's right. And also, he has learned over the years how to be resilient, how to adapt. I mean, he's constantly having to do that on a daily basis. The world is not designed for someone who stands at 3 foot 9 inches tall. But when you realize you've got the skill set to design your own solutions, to bounce back, it is so empowering. And, the fact that he was able to write and publish a book at the age of 18 and feel like he is able to give people not just hope, but a toolkit on how to move forward in life is an incredible thing.
And how has his career changed you?
His career has changed me by putting me in rooms that I have never imagined being in. And it's made me really uncomfortable. And I've learned how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm not one that really, craves the spotlight or the stage, but I love seeing him do what he does. And as a result, I know in order to most effectively support him, I have to literally and metaphorically be there by his side. And it's been incredible. I have enjoyed most of all the people that we've met on the journey. I mean, you and I probably would have never had our paths cross had it not been, for the conference that we attend every year for the National Speakers Association. And I feel like Brandon's career has opened this entire world of energetic, interesting human beings who refuse to be on a typical conventional path in life.
Absolutely. People say to me all the time, like, I don't know how you can talk about sad stuff. And, like my daughter was born in 2009. They're like, it's been so long. Shouldn't you be over it? And I'm like, my life is so different now. And it's not sad. It is inspirational. I think we lost you again.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. So yeah, I mean, my life is on a totally different path now than it's ever been. And I feel like there's nothing sad about it. It's inspirational. We're helping. I get to meet cool people all the time who have these amazing stories. And so, Brandon being born with this dwarfism, or what is the name of it? The official name?
It's called metatropic dysplasia.
Metatrophic dysplasia. So him just being born with that has nothing, like I would have, you're right, our paths would have never crossed. Him taking that and turning it into a positive and making a difference in the world. Now, I get to meet people like him all the time, people like you who are taking a pause as something that was painful in your own life and using it as a positive and making a difference. And so those same people that were probably teasing him years ago, I'm sure are envious now when they see some of the cool stuff that he gets to do and you get to do alongside with him.
Yeah, the beauty of social media. It enables a lot of people to, sort of keep in touch from a distance and see what's going on.
Very cool. And it gives them, again, the whole message of empowerment and empathy. I just think today it's so critical with everything that's going on in the world. I think it's very relevant to even the discussions we've had with the riots. If you can get to see people for who they are and not what they look like.
Absolutely. And just, try to put yourself in their shoes and understand how they got to where they are and where all those feelings and emotions come from. It's really interesting because so many people will either ask him after one of his talks or pull me aside and ask me, how did you all move on when all that cyberbullying happened? Because it resurfaced again his junior year, and it was even more horrific than it had been freshman year. And what we ended up doing was using that experience and testifying in front of the Virginia General Assembly, figuring that if we share our experience, perhaps it will make a difference for families in the future. And as a result, we had 2 pieces of legislation signed into law. It also made us realize that these people that are doing the bullying, we have to ask what the why is behind their actions, because it really is hurt people who hurt people. And what is it that we can do in our education system and as a society to help our youth grow their toolkit so that if they have things going on in their life, that they're able to articulate all those hard feelings and not lash out at other people to get their anger out.
Right. And so where I think that this is going to be extremely powerful is think for a moment about all the parents out there. They may not have conditions like Brandon had, but parents who have kids who are dealing with cyberbullying, parents who have kids that have found themselves turning to drugs and alcohol. There's a whole number of reasons why parents are suffering watching their children suffer. So what advice do you have to the parents out there that are watching their children go through stuff?
I would say it's never too late to start seeing your child for who they are and not the vision of who you want them to be. There is such beauty in authentic conversation and not just, you're not doing this, you're not good enough in that, your grades suck. We as parents sometimes tend to put so much stress and anxiety on our kids because we fed into society's expectation that they need to have straight A's and they need to take all these AP classes in order to get into the right college, because without that, they're not going to have a successful life. We have to stop that cycle. And we have to realize that our kids are going to define their own path, and that we as parents could be there to support them on their journey. So for all parents that are out there feeling like they are isolated in their own suffering, find your tribe, find other parents that you can talk to, find professionals that you can speak with, and understand that you are not alone, and that whatever your child is going through, they are not alone, and help them find people that they can confide in as well.
That's great. So many of the parents that I talk to seem to end up in a worse emotional state than their children are when they see them going through stuff. And I've had several parents on the verge of suicide because of something their child was going through. And, it's really difficult to see your kids struggling. I know that.
Absolutely. We feel, when we have a child, we look at the baby and we feel like our job is to always protect them and make sure that everything is right in their world. But in reality, there is so little that we as parents have control over. And I think a missing element a lot of times is being human in front of our kids and vulnerably sharing with them, I see you're struggling and I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to help you find them. Instead of feeling that we as parents have to be perfect. What I've realized as my kids have gotten older, especially, is that our kids are always watching us. I've realized it during this pandemic that there are, certain people that I see online that are just, going off on rants against this political party or that, or, whatever the topic of the day is, they will find a reason to have issue with it. I choose not to engage in that. I want my kids to see that the priority is for me to focus on my own health, to make sure that I could show up at my truest self for my husband, for them, for the world. I mean, that's the bottom line. We need to just make sure that we are role models at every stage of raising our kids. And when we mess up, it's okay. And, you say you're sorry and you move on. Those are the lessons that are going to stick with them.
Absolutely. When things don't work out in our lives, quite often people look for reasons. They want someone to blame. And that's where all the political stuff is coming from. And who can I blame for the fact that we're stuck in home now in this quarantine and everything else? And, instead of using it as an opportunity to prepare yourself for whatever's to come next.
Absolutely. And we all have such great opportunity to grow. We all have access to technology and books and podcasts, and there's always reason for us to be learning and to be intellectually curious. And those are the things that we need to focus on rather than getting stuck in all those things that we cannot control that are filled with so much negativity.
So quickly, I see behind you Brandon's picture along with the 10-foot tall poster. Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, Brandon wrote a book 10 feet tall. It is filled with concise chapters of his life lessons that he has learned throughout his journey in life, navigating all these, pitfalls and bumps in the road. And he is so happy to be able to share that with people. So that book is available on Amazon. And speaking has now pivoted from the live stage to virtual. So hopefully there'll be many opportunities to grow audiences and serve audiences that we haven't even imagined meeting.
Right. And so what are you most excited about in your future?
I'm just excited about what is going to unfold. I know that the world is never going to go back to the way things were. And don't get me wrong, I was very happy and comfortable with many things that were, but that's not going to happen. So I'm excited to see what our better normal is. And I truly hope that it will be a better normal. I feel like if we as individuals focus on what we are learning from this experience and use those lessons to move forward in our own lives, then collectively we're going to raise the energy of society going forward. So I'm just excited to see how things will unfold, and I am hopeful that there will be a better normal.
Awesome. And I ask everybody in one sentence, what is one final piece of advice you would give to somebody feeling stuck?
One piece of advice that I would give to someone feeling stuck is to breathe and be in the moment. Because truly the only thing that we have control over is our breath right now. And focusing on the moment gives us a calm and a peace to be able to take that step that will lead us to the next thing. And that's how we get unstuck.
That's awesome. How can we get in touch with you or follow you?
Sure. So we've got some great content on Brandon's website, brandonfarbstein.com. He posts daily content on his Instagram, which is at Farbstein, just our last name. He's got a public Facebook page, Brandon Farbstein, that you can follow, and certainly get in touch with us on any of those platforms. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Sylvia Farbstein. So I love connecting and learning and growing. So I am hoping that that will continue.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Sylvia, and we hope to catch you guys again next week.
Thank you so much.
Make sure you head over to unstuckandhappy.com, where you'll find the video version of all of our podcasts, as well as information about upcoming Unstuck Happiness conferences and moving beyond personal development retreats. Those are amazing. Make sure you join us again next week for another great Unstuck story. And in the meantime, keep living unstuck and happy.